She had nothing to eat, not a kobo to her name, and yet when she saw him, a tired bricklayer sitting by the roadside, exhausted and hungry, she did the impossible. She gave him her last meal. What happened next would change her life forever, in ways she never could have imagined. The streets of Lagos were alive with noise, people calling out to sell their wares, cars honking, and children weaving in and out with laughter that carried through the evening air. Amid all that movement was a young woman named Amaka, her steps slow and tired as she clutched a small nylon bag that held her only food for the day. She had worked the whole afternoon cleaning at a small tailoring shop, earning just enough to buy a modest plate of rice with a tiny piece of fish. It wasn't much, but to her hungry stomach it meant everything. As she turned into a quieter street, she spotted a man sitting by the roadside. His clothes were dusty from labor, his palms rough, his head bent as if the world's weight pressed down on him. He was a bricklayer, one of the many who built houses that reached up like promises, yet he himself looked too weary to stand. His lips were dry, and his eyes carried a tiredness that spoke louder than words. Amaka slowed her steps. She felt her stomach ache, reminding her that she had not eaten since dawn. Yet something in the man's stillness made her pause. He didn't stretch his hands out to beg, didn't ask for pity. He simply sat there with dignity, though his body betrayed his need. Her heart battled with her hunger. The rice in the bag called to her, but so did the sight of this stranger who looked as though one more blow of life's hardship might break him completely. She stood for a moment, torn. Then with a deep breath, she walked over to him. "Sir," she said softly, her voice trembling though she tried to sound calm. He lifted his head, and his eyes, though weary, were kind. She held out the bag. "Please take this." The bricklayer blinked, surprised. His voice cracked when he spoke. "This is your food." Amaka forced a smile though her stomach clenched in protest. "It will mean more to you right now than to me." For a long moment, he didn't move. Then his hand, trembling, reached out. He received the food as though she had given him treasure. His eyes glistened with gratitude that words could not fully capture. "You don't know what you've done for me," he whispered, his voice low but filled with emotion. Amaka nodded quickly, not trusting herself to speak. She turned before her hunger or her tears betrayed her, walking away into the night with an empty hand and a heavier hunger, but strangely, her heart carried a quiet peace. Behind her, the bricklayer ate slowly, each bite with reverence, as if he was honoring the sacrifice she had just made. He kept watching the direction she had gone, memorizing the image of a young woman who gave away the only thing she had. Little did Amaka know, that small act, born out of kindness and sacrifice, would set in motion a chain of events that would change her life forever. Amaka woke up the next morning with her body weak but her spirit still carrying that calm from the night before. Hunger had kept her tossing in her small room, but the memory of the man's eyes, how they softened when she gave him her meal, was something she couldn't push away. She dressed slowly, tying her worn wrapper around her waist, preparing for another long day at the tailoring shop. The streets were already humming with the rhythm of people rushing to work, traders calling out their prices, the smell of roasted corn mixing with exhaust fumes in the air. She walked carefully, her sandals nearly giving way, but she didn't mind. Her mind kept wandering back to that stranger. She wondered if he had found strength to return to his work. She wondered if he had gone home with something in his belly for the first time in days. These thoughts followed her like shadows, keeping her distracted. At the shop, Madame Ifema, her employer, was already shouting at one of the apprentices. "Stitch that line straight, or you'll start again," she barked, her eyes sharp. Amaka bowed her head respectfully and greeted, "Good morning, Ma." Her day was filled with the whirring of sewing machines, the smell of fabric starch, and the ache in her back from standing too long. By noon, her stomach was crying for food. She pressed her palm against it, pretending she wasn't starving. One of the other apprentices, Ngozi, unwrapped fried yam from a newspaper and offered her a piece. Amaka smiled faintly and shook her head, though the smell made her dizzy. She didn't want pity. As the day stretched, Amaka decided to take a break and stepped outside. The sun was high, sharp on her skin. Just across the street, her eyes caught sight of a figure she thought she recognized. Her heart skipped. It was him, the bricklayer. He was leaning on a wall, no longer as frail as before, his eyes scanning the road as if searching. For a moment she hesitated, her instinct telling her to hide. But something in the way he straightened when their eyes met pulled her forward. "Good afternoon," he greeted, his voice steadier than the night before. Amaka nodded politely, unsure what to say. She thought maybe he had forgotten her face, but the way he looked at her said otherwise. "I was waiting," he said quietly. "I wanted to see you again." She frowned lightly. "Me?" He nodded. "You don't know what that food did for me yesterday. You saved me from collapsing on that road. I promised myself I wouldn't let the kindness of a stranger go unnoticed." Amaka shifted, uncomfortable with the weight of his words. She had acted out of instinct, not expecting anything in return. She shook her head. It was nothing. Anyone would have done the same. But the man smiled, a smile that carried gratitude deeper than she had ever seen. "No," he said. "Not anyone. Only someone with a rare heart." She looked away, embarrassed, her fingers fiddling with the edge of her wrapper. "I should go back to work," she murmured. Before she could turn, he spoke again. "Please wait. I don't have much to give now, but one day I will repay you. Don't doubt it." His voice was steady, almost like a vow. Amaka gave him a small nod, not knowing how to respond. She didn't see herself as someone deserving of promises. She was just a poor girl trying to survive. Still, his words stayed with her long after she walked back inside. That evening, when the shop closed, she found him waiting again. He walked beside her without speaking, carrying a quiet respect, as if protecting her from the chaos of the street. At the junction where their paths split, he stopped. "My name is Chaik," he said finally. She looked up at him. "Amaka." He smiled, repeating her name softly as though memorizing it. "I'll never forget it." Amaka walked the rest of the way home with her heart strangely light. For the first time in a long while, someone had spoken her name with meaning, not as just another girl trying to make ends meet. The next morning came quietly, with the faint call of hawkers and the sound of buses honking at the junction nearby. Amaka sat on the edge of her wooden bed, staring at the small window where sunlight leaked in. She felt that same tugging thought again, the memory of Chaik's voice when he said her name. It was strange, almost unsettling, how his words echoed in her heart like a drumbeat that refused to fade. She shook her head as though she could scatter it, but it remained. Her morning routine was always the same: wash her face, sweep her little room, tie her wrapper, and prepare herself for another long day. But this morning, she moved slower, distracted by questions. Who really was Chaik? What was his story? How had life pushed him to the roadside, hungry and weak? She wanted to know, yet she also feared what answers might come. When she reached the tailoring shop, work swallowed her quickly. Orders had piled up, brides-to-be demanding their gowns, traders bringing Ankara fabrics in heaps. Madame Ifema barked orders while Amaka bent over the cutting table, scissors in hand. Hours dragged like stones. But deep down, she wondered if she would see him again. And she did. It was late afternoon when she stepped out to fetch water from a nearby kiosk. The sun was softer, the air heavy with the smell of roasted plantain. There he was again, standing under the shade of a small kiosk, waiting. She froze for a moment, her heart racing though she didn't know why. He noticed her immediately and walked over with a careful, respectful step. "Amaka," he greeted, his lips curving into that smile that seemed to light his entire face. She tilted her head slightly. "You came again. I told you I wouldn't forget you," he said. His tone carried something more than gratitude now, something steadier, warmer. "I wanted to walk with you, if you'll allow it." She hesitated, but his calm presence disarmed her. She nodded, and they began to walk down the uneven road, side by side. For the first few minutes, neither spoke. The silence wasn't heavy, though, it was almost soothing, like the kind of silence where two people are simply glad to exist near each other. Eventually, he broke it. "I came from Enugu years ago," he said. "I was young, full of energy, ready to build the world with my hands. Bricklaying was all I knew. It put food on my table, gave me dignity. But work has been scarce. Some days, I go without eating. That day you met me, I thought I would faint. Then you came." Amaka's chest tightened as she listened. She didn't know why, but her eyes burned with unshed tears. She had her own struggles, yet his story carried a weight she could feel in her bones. "I didn't do much," she murmured. He looked at her with such intensity that she almost faltered in her steps. "You did everything. When the world turned its face away, you turned toward me." They walked farther until they reached the point where their paths usually split. Amaka stopped and looked at him. "Life hasn't been kind to either of us," she said softly, almost like a confession. Chike nodded slowly. "That's true. But kindness itself, that's what makes life bearable." Their eyes lingered, and for a moment it felt as though the noise of the city around them faded, leaving only that fragile thread of connection hanging between them. From that day on, their paths began to cross more often. Sometimes by chance, sometimes because Chike made sure to wait at the junction just to see her. He didn't press her with questions, didn't burden her with his problems. Instead, he brought a kind of steadiness, a companionship Amaka had never known. One evening, rain threatened the skies, the kind that came suddenly in Lagos and turned streets into rivers. Amaka closed from the shop late, worried she'd be drenched. But at the corner, under the shade of a small umbrella, Chike stood waiting. He stepped forward quickly, holding the umbrella over her head. "You'll catch cold," he said simply, as if it was the most natural thing in the world to shield her. She laughed softly, almost shy. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he replied. They walked together in the rain's steady rhythm, the umbrella just big enough to keep them both close. Amaka felt something stir deep within her, not just gratitude, but a sweetness she hadn't tasted before, the kind that filled empty spaces in her heart more than food ever could. Days turned into weeks, and each meeting left her with a quiet longing. He would talk about his dreams of building houses for people, not just for money but to give others a place to belong. She would listen, her eyes wide, her spirit lifting at the way he spoke with hope despite his struggles. Amaka began to notice the way her steps quickened whenever she thought she might see him. She noticed how her laughter came easier, how her burdens felt lighter when he was near. She didn't want to admit it to herself, but something beautiful was beginning to grow, like a flower pushing through cracked concrete. And deep in her heart, she didn't know it yet, but the seeds of her kindness were preparing to bloom into blessings far beyond her imagination. That week stretched on with a quiet rhythm Amaka could not ignore. Every day brought its usual challenges, the heavy fabrics she carried at the shop, the sharp scolding voice of Madame Ephema, the ache in her back from standing too long. Yet, beneath all that, something new stirred inside her. It was not money, not food, not any physical thing. It was the memory of Chike's voice, his smile, the way he looked at her as if she mattered. Her life had always felt like one long, endless road of survival. But now, each day seemed to carry a small, hidden spark. She didn't admit it to herself fully, but she found that spark whenever she thought of him. One Friday evening, the shop closed later than usual. The sky was painted in streaks of purple, and the faint buzz of generators had begun across the street. Amaka stepped out, her body heavy with exhaustion. And just as she had come to expect, there he was. Chike, waiting at the corner, his shirt clean though worn, his hands tucked behind his back. "You waited again," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and something softer. He smiled, that same gentle smile that always seemed to quiet her heart. "I told you, I'll keep waiting. Until you tell me to stop." Amaka looked away quickly, her lips curving without her permission. "You don't have to do that." "I know," he said. "But I want to." They began to walk side by side, the city buzzing around them, but their silence creating a small, safe pocket. After a while, Chike spoke. Amaka, can I tell you something? Something I don't usually share. She turned to him, her steps slowing. What is it? He took a deep breath. I grew up in a family where we had very little. My father was a bricklayer, too. He used to say, the world doesn't always give, but your hands can build what you need. I believed him. That's why I left home to work in the city. I thought I could build a life, build something bigger. But the city, his voice trailed, his eyes clouded. The city doesn't care how hard you work. It takes, and sometimes it gives nothing back. Amaka listened quietly, her chest tightening. She knew that truth too well. The city had drained her as well, leaving her with only scraps and long days. But then, his eyes softened as they met hers. Until you came, he said quietly. Her breath caught. She looked down quickly, afraid of the storm stirring in her chest. Chike, you don't owe me anything. He shook his head. It's not about owing. It's about seeing. You saw me when everyone else looked away. That kind of kindness, it changes a man. They stopped at their usual junction. The road stretched apart, his path leading right, hers left. She hesitated before speaking. Sometimes I feel invisible too. Like the world doesn't even know I exist. Chike's gaze held hers. You are not invisible. Not to me. Her heart stuttered in her chest. For a long time, she had carried her struggles quietly, with no one to notice her strength, her sacrifices, her silent battles. Yet, here was a man, broken in his own ways, who still found a way to see her clearly. From that evening on, their conversations deepened. Some days, he spoke about his dreams, how he wanted to save enough money to start his own small building company, how he wanted to build a house that could never be taken away. Other days, he listened as she spoke about her childhood in the village, how her parents struggled to put her through school before passing away too soon. One particular evening, as they walked home, the air was heavy with the scent of fried akara from a nearby stall. Chike stopped suddenly and pulled a small paper wrap from his pocket. He handed it to her shyly. What's this? She asked. Akara, he said, smiling sheepishly. I saved a little today. I wanted you to eat. Amaka froze, staring at the warm bundle in her hands. Her chest swelled with emotion. It was not much, but it was everything. For someone who had given her last meal away not long ago, to now be receiving food so sincerely, it was like life itself had come full circle. She looked up at him, her eyes wet. You shouldn't have. I wanted to, he said simply. She took a small bite, the taste rich, the moment richer. It was not about the akara, it was about the gesture, about the way he looked at her as though she was worth caring for. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between them grew like roots intertwining quietly beneath the soil. Amaka found herself smiling more, laughing softly when he told stories of his work at building sites. Chike found strength in her presence, pushing himself harder, determined to climb out of struggle. But beyond the companionship, there was something unspoken hanging in the air, something tender, delicate, and new. Each time they parted at the junction, their eyes lingered just a little longer. Each time he said her name, her heart answered with a rhythm she couldn't deny. Neither of them said it out loud yet. But they both felt it. A story was unfolding between them, and though neither could predict where it would lead, both knew one thing for certain: it had all started with a single plate of food and a single act of kindness. And that seed, planted quietly in hunger and sacrifice, was beginning to blossom into something bigger than either of them could have imagined. Even as the days rolled into weeks, the rhythm of Amaka and Chike's meetings became a quiet certainty in the chaos of Lagos. Life had not grown easier, the streets remained rough, the air thick with the smell of fried foods and car fumes, and work at the tailoring shop was unrelenting. Yet something had shifted in Amaka's world. The emptiness that had once echoed in her chest had softened, replaced by anticipation, by hope, by the quiet warmth of companionship that she had never known. One late afternoon, Chike approached her as she was stepping out from the shop, holding a small wooden box wrapped with a faded piece of cloth. I have something for you, he said, his voice hesitant but steady. Amaka tilted her head, curious but cautious. "What is it?" He handed her the box. She lifted the cloth, and inside were small, carefully polished bricks no bigger than her palm, each one engraved with her name. "I made these," he said, his hands shifting nervously. "For you. To remind you of the strength you give to people, even without knowing it." Her fingers trembled as she touched them. She felt a flood of emotions she couldn't name: gratitude, surprise, awe. "Chike, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "Just know that your kindness is more powerful than any wealth. More than any meal. More than anything I've ever received." She looked up at him, and in that gaze, she saw more than gratitude. She saw a quiet admiration, a respect that went deeper than words. For the first time, she realized that the simple act of giving, of noticing someone else's suffering, had built something far larger than either of them could have imagined. The next morning, Amaka found herself lingering longer on the street before entering the shop. She knew Chike would be somewhere nearby, waiting. And he was. He greeted her with that smile, the one that seemed to carry sunlight even on the dullest days. "You're quiet today," he said, noticing the way her eyes wandered. "I was thinking," she admitted, "about how things could change." He glanced at her, curious. "Change how?" "Life," she said simply. "How maybe it doesn't have to be just surviving. How maybe we can build something better." Chike nodded slowly, understanding exactly what she meant. "I think about that too. Every day. And I want to make it real. I want to build something that lasts, not just for me, but for people who need hope." She smiled, a little shyly. "Maybe we can do it together." From that day, their conversations began to shift from survival to dreams. They spoke about the houses Chike wanted to build, not just structures of brick and cement, but homes filled with warmth and care. Amaka shared her own visions: a small business, a place where people could learn skills and support each other. Slowly, quietly, they began to see how their lives could intertwine, how their struggles could become a shared foundation rather than separate burdens. Weeks passed, and the city around them continued its relentless pulse, but Amaka and Chike found small moments of peace in each other's presence. They shared meals when they could, walked together under the fading sun, and spoke about everything from their childhoods to the dreams they had buried under survival. One evening, as they walked along a quieter street, Chike stopped. "I have a surprise," he said, pulling a small piece of paper from his pocket. He handed it to her. Amaka unfolded it carefully. It was a sketch of a small building, simple but beautiful, with windows that seemed to open wide to the sky. "It's your idea," he said. "The community center you talked about. I started drawing it last night. I want to help make it real." Amaka's breath caught. "Chike, I don't know what to say. I never imagined." "You don't have to say anything," he said softly. "Just believe it can happen." Her eyes glistened. For years, she had dreamed quietly, hoping that life would allow her to do more than survive. And now, here was a man who not only saw her dreams but wanted to build them alongside her. As they walked together under the dim streetlights, the city seemed a little less harsh. The noise was still there, the streets still crowded and uneven, but for the first time, Amaka felt a thread of hope weaving through her life. Something tangible, something real. Days turned into weeks, and Chike's small acts of care continued, saving little bits of food to share, offering to help with errands, staying by her side when the nights were too quiet and the world felt too heavy. Amaka found herself thinking less about what she lacked and more about what they could build together, how small acts of kindness had turned into something larger, something that could carry them beyond mere survival. And yet, beneath the comfort, beneath the shared dreams and gentle smiles, a deeper emotion was quietly growing. Neither spoke it aloud yet, but both could feel it: a connection that went beyond gratitude, beyond companionship. A bond that was ready to turn into something more, something that could change the course of their lives entirely. The city roared around them, uncaring and indifferent, but in those moments when they walked together, when Chike handed her a simple sketch or shared a warm meal, the world felt small, intimate, and full of promise. Amaka had given away her last meal months ago, never imagining that such a small gesture could ripple through her life so profoundly. And now, as she walked beside Chaik, sharing dreams and laughter, she began to understand some acts of kindness, no matter how small, have the power to build worlds, to transform lives, to create bonds that even the harshest city could not break. And for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where hope was not a fleeting visitor but a constant companion. Where kindness was returned not just in gratitude, but in shared dreams and shared lives. Where love, quiet and patient, could grow from the soil of sacrifice and bloom into something that neither of them had dared to hope for before. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Amaka had ever experienced. The streets of Lagos, with their noise, their heat, and their relentless chaos, no longer seemed quite so oppressive. There was a rhythm now, a quiet pulse in her life that came from the small moments she shared with Chaik. Each encounter was a reminder that the world, despite its hardships, could offer unexpected gifts. One morning, she woke to the smell of fresh bread from a nearby vendor and the faint hum of engines along the street. Her stomach was still light, still hungry, but her heart carried a fullness that food could never provide. She dressed quickly and stepped outside, her eyes scanning for Chaik. And there he was, leaning casually against a post, his hands in his pockets, eyes bright with that familiar warmth. "Good morning," he greeted, his voice carrying across the street. "Good morning," she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. Without speaking, they walked together, sharing the quiet of early morning. The city had not slowed for them, but somehow, their connection created a bubble where the chaos softened, where the air seemed lighter, where hope could breathe. Chaik began to talk about the building he had been planning. The sketches he had shown her before were now more detailed, more alive. "I've been saving," he said quietly. "A little at a time. I want us to start building it not just for us, but for people who have nowhere to go, nowhere to dream." Amaka's eyes glistened. "Chaik, it's beautiful, but are you sure we can do it?" He stopped walking and turned to her. "I know we can. You've taught me that giving, even when it seems impossible, changes things. And together, we can make the impossible possible." Her chest swelled with emotion. For so long, she had felt powerless, like life had left her with only scraps. But now, here was a man who saw her strength, who believed in it, who wanted to build a future with her. Over the next few months, their plans began to take shape. Chaik worked tirelessly, laying bricks, drawing plans, and saving every coin he could spare. Amaka contributed what she could, small savings, her time, her energy, even her encouragement. Each day, the foundation of their building grew, not just with bricks and cement, but with shared dreams, laughter, and hope. Neighbors began to notice the change. Children would peek through the partially built walls, curious about the new structure. Traders passing by would stop to watch Chaik work, impressed by his determination and the careful way Amaka oversaw the small tasks she could handle. Even the city itself seemed to lean in, as if it recognized the miracle unfolding in that small corner of the streets. One evening, after a long day of work, Chaik and Amaka sat on the rough cement foundation, watching the sun dip low, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air was warm, carrying the distant sound of laughter and music from the street. "You know," Chaik said, breaking the silence, "I never thought giving a meal away could lead to this." Amaka laughed softly. "Neither did I. I thought I was just helping someone in need, nothing more." He turned to look at her, his eyes holding hers steadily. "But it was more. Everything we've built, every brick, every plan, every day we've shared, it started with that one moment of kindness. You changed my life that day." Her heart beat faster. "Chaik, you've changed mine too. You've made me believe that life can be more than just surviving. That kindness, that love, it really can grow into something bigger than we imagine." He reached out and took her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, as though they had been made to fit together. "Amaka, I want us to keep building, together. Not just the building, but everything. Our dreams, our lives, Everything. Tears welled in her eyes, and she nodded, unable to speak. She felt the weight of the city, of her struggles, lift slightly, replaced by a lightness that came from being seen, being valued, and being loved. The construction continued, each brick laid with care, each wall a testament to their shared effort. People in the neighborhood began to rely on them, coming for advice, for help, for the warmth that radiated from their dedication. The building became more than just a structure, it became a symbol, a promise, a small miracle born from compassion. And then, one evening, when the sun had dipped completely and the city lights flickered to life, Chaik stopped working and turned to Amaka. He took both her hands in his. Amaka, I don't want to wait any longer to tell you. I love you. I have from the first moment you gave me your last meal. You've given me more than food. You've given me hope, a reason to dream, a reason to live. Her tears flowed freely now, but they were tears of joy, of relief, of a heart that had finally found its other half. Chaik. I love you too, she whispered. I have for a long time, I just didn't know how to say it. He pulled her close, holding her as if letting go was impossible. Around them, the city roared, indifferent as ever, but inside their small bubble, there was only peace, only warmth, only the truth of a love that had grown from something as simple and pure as giving away a single meal. That night, as they sat together on the partially built foundation, stars twinkling above, Amaka realized that life had a way of rewarding kindness in ways she could never have imagined. One act, born from empathy and courage, had led to love, hope, and a future filled with endless possibilities. The next morning, they returned to the construction site, hands intertwined, hearts aligned, ready to continue building. Not just a building, but a life together, one brick, one dream, one act of love at a time. And so, from the smallest act of giving, Amaka and Chaik's story unfolded into something extraordinary. A story of hope, of resilience, of love born in the most unlikely of places, proving that even in the hardest corners of life, kindness can plant seeds that grow into miracles beyond imagination. And that's how a single act of kindness turned a simple girl's life into a story beyond imagination. Remember, even the smallest gesture can change someone's world, and maybe your own too. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more tales like this. We'd love to know which country are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? Drop it in the comments and let's connect across the world.